Old lady, don't even think about coming here. I don't need you. Go die of old age alone. When I read those words on my cell phone screen on the night of December 22nd, I felt as if someone had ripped the heart right out of my chest with their bare hands. I was in the kitchen of my modest little house, wrapping the gifts I had prepared with so much love to take to my son, Ethan, the next day. A jar of my homemade blackberry jam, the kind he had loved since he was a boy. A wool scarf that I spent weeks knitting, even with my fingers aching from arthritis. And a bottle of wine that I had been saving for years for a special occasion. My eyes reread the message 5, 6, 10 times. Every word was like a stab wound. But something inside me, that mother's instinct that never fails, screamed that something was terribly wrong. Ethan would never call me old lady like that. He was always affectionate, respectful. Even when he had a problem or was annoyed with me, he talked it out. He explained things. Never in his 32 years of life had he treated me with such coldness. I tried to call. The first time it went straight to voicemail, the second time too. My heart began to race, not from emotional pain, but from pure fear. Something was wrong, very wrong. I called Sarah, my daughter-in-law. The phone rang for a long time before she picked up. When I finally heard her voice, I immediately sensed that something wasn't right. "Hello, Mrs. Miller," she said, and her voice trembled in a strange way. It wasn't the cheerful, chatty Sarah I knew. It was a tense, frightened voice. "Sarah, honey, is everything okay? Ethan sent me a strange message saying not to come tomorrow." There was a pause that lasted too long. I heard heavy breathing on the other end, as if she were trying to control tears or panic. "Him? He's asleep right now, Mrs. Miller. He had a tough day at work. I think it's best if you don't come. He's very tired and—" "Sarah, what is going on?" I interrupted her, feeling fear tighten around my throat. "Where are you guys? Why does your voice sound like that?" "We're at the house. Everything is normal. It's just that." "Oh, excuse me, Mrs. Miller. It's really loud here. There's a party at the neighbor's house and—" But I didn't hear a party. What I heard, very faintly behind her voice, was music that made my blood run cold. It was that aggressive, heavy rap music, full of profanity and violence, that Ethan always hated. He would never allow that kind of music in his house. And then I heard something else. A male voice, raspy and aggressive, saying, "Turn that crap off. Tell that old bee to get lost." And the call cut off. I stood there, gripping the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. 70 years of life had taught me to trust my gut. And in that moment, every fiber of my being screamed that my son was in danger. Some neighbors passing by the window saw me looking dazed and tried to console me. "Oh, Mrs. Miller, let it go. Kids grow up and sometimes they get ungrateful. That's just life." But I didn't believe them. I couldn't believe it. The boy who cried when I hurt my arm at the butcher shop and insisted on taking care of me for a whole week. The man who promised, on his father's grave, that he would always look after me. That man wouldn't write those cruel words. I looked at the gifts on the table. I looked at my old, trembling hands. I looked at the clock on the wall, marking almost midnight, and I made a decision. If I was wrong, if Ethan really didn't want to see me, I would come home and keep my pain to myself. But if I was right, if something bad was happening to my son, I would never forgive myself for not going. I went to my bedroom and opened the drawer of the dresser where I keep my important things. Way in the back, wrapped in an old cloth, was the buck knife that belonged to my husband. It was an antique piece, with a carved wooden handle, the blade still sharp even after all these years. I took it and tucked it deep into the bottom of my purse. I am not a violent woman. I spent my entire life caring for people, healing wounds, not causing them. But that night, if someone had hurt my son, they would discover that a mother protecting her young is the most dangerous creature in this world. I put on my warmest coat, grabbed my purse, and left the gifts behind. I wasn't going to a Christmas dinner. I was going to rescue my son. But before we continue, check if you are already subscribed to the channel and write in the comments, where are you watching this video from? We love knowing how far our stories are reaching. The bus terminal was almost empty at that time of night, Just a few passengers dozing on the hard benches, waiting for buses that would leave in the early morning. I bought a ticket to Columbus, the city where Ethan lived, 2 hours away. The next bus would leave in 40 minutes. I sat in a corner clutching my purse against my chest and tried to think clearly. What could be happening? Ethan had a good life, a stable job as an engineer at a respected firm, a nice house that he and Sarah had bought 3 years ago, a marriage that seemed happy, or at least that's what I thought. But in the last few months, I noticed that something had changed. Ethan was more distant in our weekly phone calls, less talkative. When I asked him if everything was okay, he said yes, but his voice didn't have the same joy as before. Sarah also seemed different the few times we talked, more nervous, more evasive. I attributed it all to work stress, the pressures of adult life. I never imagined it could be something more serious, something dangerous. The bus finally arrived. I climbed the steps with difficulty, my old legs protesting against the rush and fatigue. I found a seat in the back and settled in by the window. The night outside was pitch black, just a few occasional lights from isolated houses flickering in the darkness as the bus moved down the highway. I closed my eyes, but I couldn't sleep. My mind wouldn't stop replaying every detail of the call with Sarah, that aggressive male voice in the background. Who was it? Why was he in my son's house? And why was Sarah so scared? I thought about her brother, Caleb. Ethan had told me, months ago, about the problems Caleb was causing. Involved with the wrong crowd, always borrowing money, showing up at the house drunk. Ethan had forbidden Caleb from entering their home after a nasty fight where Caleb had stolen some valuables to sell for drugs. Could it be him? Had Caleb come back? And if so, what was he doing there? Fear grew inside me like a living, pulsing thing. I squeezed my purse tighter, feeling the outline of the knife through the fabric. I didn't know exactly what I would find when I got there, but I knew I needed to be prepared for anything. The 2-hour trip felt like an eternity. When we finally arrived at the bus station in Columbus, it was already past 2 in the morning. I got off the bus, feeling the biting cold of the early morning penetrate my bones. My old body ached, but I ignored the pain. There were more important things at stake. I took a taxi to the subdivision where Ethan lived. The driver, a middle-aged man who looked sleepy, tried to make small talk, but I barely responded. I was too focused on what was coming, on what I might find. When we got close to Ethan's street, I asked the driver to stop about 3 blocks away. I didn't want to draw attention by arriving in a taxi right in front of the house. I paid for the ride and got out, feeling my legs tremble, but not from cold or fatigue, from pure fear and determination. I walked slowly down the silent street. It was a quiet residential area. Nice houses with well-kept lawns. Some still had Christmas lights blinking, creating a festive atmosphere that contrasted cruelly with the terror I felt in my chest. Ethan's house was in the middle of the block. When I saw it, my heart almost stopped. All the lights were off, the curtains drawn. But what scared me the most was the vehicle parked in front. It wasn't Ethan's silver sedan. It was a black pickup truck, old and dented, with tinted windows. And there was another car behind it, equally suspicious. I hid behind a large tree on the sidewalk across the street and stood there watching. The house was completely dark and silent, too silent. The neighbor's house on one side had Christmas lights blinking cheerfully. The other had an illuminated Santa Claus decoration on the lawn. But my son's house looked dead, as if it were abandoned. But I knew it wasn't empty. Those strange cars parked there were proof of that. I waited about 15 minutes, just watching, trying to understand the situation. My body was shaking, not just from the cold, but from the fear of the unknown. What was happening in there? Where was Ethan? And Sarah? Finally, I gathered my courage and crossed the street. I walked slowly, trying to make as little noise as possible. When I got near the living room window, I tried to peek through a crack in the curtains. At first, I didn't see anything, but then my eyes adjusted to the darkness, and I managed to make out shapes inside. There were people in the living room, at least 3 or 4. They were sitting down. They seemed to be talking, but I couldn't hear what they were saying. Where was Ethan? I decided to go around the house. There had to be some way to get in, an open window, some way to find out what was going on. The side gate that led to the backyard was ajar. I pushed it slowly, praying it wouldn't make noise. It creaked a little, but not enough to alert whoever was inside. The backyard was just as dark as the front of the house. There was a small shed in the corner, where Ethan kept tools and gardening equipment. The windows at the back of the house also had the curtains drawn, but one of them had a small gap. I approached carefully and put my eye to the opening. What I saw made my blood run cold. In the kitchen, under a dim light, were Sarah and a man I recognized as Caleb, her brother. But Caleb looked different from what I remembered. Thinner, with a gaunt face, sunken, red eyes. He had new tattoos on his arms and neck, and there was a gun on the kitchen table, right next to a bottle of liquor. Sarah was leaning against the sink, arms crossed, crying silently. Caleb was gesturing aggressively, saying something I couldn't hear through the glass. He pointed at her, then toward the living room, clearly nervous and agitated. But what scared me the most was noticing that Ethan wasn't there. He wasn't in the kitchen. I didn't see his shadow anywhere. Where was my son? Suddenly, Caleb grabbed the gun from the table. Sarah jumped in fright and covered her mouth with her hands, stifling a scream. He didn't point it at her, but he waved the gun in the air while he spoke, as if he were making threats. My heart was beating so loud I was afraid they might hear it. I backed away from the window and leaned against the wall of the house, trying to think. I needed to find Ethan. I needed to know if he was okay, and I needed to do that without being seen, without alerting Caleb and whoever else was in there. I looked toward the shed in the corner of the yard. It was locked with a large, new padlock. Strange. Ethan never locked the shed with a padlock. He always said there was nothing of value in there, just old tools and flower pots. Why lock it now? And why with such a big padlock? I approached slowly, stepping on the wet grass that muffled my footsteps. When I got close to the shed, I heard something that made every muscle in my body tense up. A moan, low, stifled, but unmistakable. It was coming from inside the shed. I pressed my ear against the old wooden door. I listened again. It was definitely a moan of pain. And then, so softly I almost didn't hear it, a voice whispered, "Please, water." I recognized that voice instantly. Even hoarse, even broken by pain, it was my son's voice. "Ethan," I whispered, pressing my mouth against the crack in the door. "Ethan, it's me." "It's Mom." There was silence on the other side, then the sound of chains moving. Chains? My God, what had they done to him? "Mom?" Ethan's voice came, incredulous, desperate. "Mom, no, you can't be here. You have to leave. Now, it's dangerous." "I'm not going anywhere without you," I replied, trying to control the tremor in my voice. "What did they do to you? What is happening?" Through the crack, I heard my son start to cry. Not a child's cry, but the cry of a grown man completely broken, defeated. "They caught me. Mom, Caleb and his friends. They're using my house to stash drugs. I found out and tried to stop it. I tried to call the police, but they grabbed me first. They beat me, Mom. They broke my leg. They chained me up in here." Every word was a knife to my heart. My son, my boy, was in there, hurt, chained like an animal. "And Sarah?" I managed to ask, although I could barely speak. She's scared. Caleb threatened to kill her if she didn't cooperate. He forced her to give him my unlocked phone. It was him who sent that message to you. He wanted to make sure no one came here and ruined his plans. The rage I felt in that moment was so intense it overshadowed even the fear. How dare they? How dare they do this to my son? In his own house? "Mom, please, go," Ethan begged. "They'll kill you if they find out you're here. Caleb is high, out of control. He has a gun. He already said several times he's going to kill me as soon as he finishes using the house. He says he's going to make it look like an accident. Please, Mom, save yourself." "I am not leaving you here," I replied firmly, wiping the tears streaming down my face. "I am your mother. I brought you into this world. I took care of you when you were little and sick. I taught you to walk, to talk, and I am not going to abandon you now." I looked at the padlock. It was big, heavy duty. There was no way to open it without the key. But the shed door was old, the wood was half rotten in some spots, and the hinges looked rusty. I looked around the yard, searching for something I could use. There was a crowbar leaning against the back wall of the house, probably used by Ethan for some repair. I grabbed it, feeling the cold weight of the metal in my old hands. I went back to the shed and inserted the tip of the crowbar between the door and the frame, right below the padlock. I wouldn't try to force the padlock itself, but rip out the rusty hinges. "Mom, what are you doing?" Ethan whispered, alarmed. "The noise is going to alert them." "Then I better be quick," I replied. I took a deep breath and started to apply force. The old wood creaked, but held. I tried again, putting my entire body weight on the crowbar. This time I heard a crack. One of the hinges had partially come loose. I continued applying force, ignoring the pain in my old arms, ignoring the fear. Another crack. The second hinge started to give, just a little more. Just one more. "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" The voice came from behind me, raspy and threatening. I spun around and saw a man standing a few yards away. He was big, muscular, with a shaved head and tattoos covering his arms. He had come out of the back of the house and was now looking at me with an expression between surprise and rage. "Caleb is gonna love this," he said, advancing in my direction with a cruel smile. A nosy old lady coming to stick her nose where it doesn't belong. My hand reached inside the purse that still hung from my shoulder. My fingers found the wooden handle of the knife. I pulled it out and flicked the blade open with a quick movement. The man stopped, surprised. Then he laughed. "Seriously, Grandma? You gonna threaten me with a little kitchen knife? Do you have any idea who I am? What I do to people who get in my way?" "I don't care who you are," I replied, holding the knife with both hands to control the shaking. "You touched my son, you hurt him, and you are going to pay for that." He laughed again and lunged. I didn't think. I just reacted. When he reached out his hand to grab me, I struck. The blade sliced his forearm, not very deep, but enough to make him recoil with a yell of pain and surprise. Crazy old bee. "You cut me!" He looked at the wound on his arm, then at me, and the amusement in his eyes transformed into pure fury. He lunged again, but this time with full force, tackling me to the ground. My head hit the hard dirt, and I saw stars. The knife flew from my hand. "I'm gonna teach you what happens to people who mess with us," he growled, hands going for my neck. I struggled, tried to scratch, kick, but he was much stronger. His hands squeezed my throat, cutting off my breath. My vision started to go dark at the edges. Was this how it was going to end? Would I die there, in my own son's backyard, without managing to save him? No, it couldn't be like this. With my last bit of strength, I searched for something, anything I could use. My hand found a rock on the ground. I grabbed it and smashed it into his head with all the force I had. He let out a grunt and loosened his grip. I took the chance to push him off and roll to the side, coughing, gasping, trying to get air back into my lungs. He shook his head, dazed, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. "Vince! What the hell is going on out there?" Caleb's voice came from the house. Heavy footsteps approached. The man named Vince stood up, stumbling, shooting me a look of hatred. But before he could do anything, the back door opened and Caleb came out, followed by another man. Caleb was still holding the gun. "What is this mess?" Caleb looked from me to Vince. "Who is that old lady?" "It's Ethan's mother," Vince replied, wiping the blood running down his face. "The bee attacked me with a knife." Caleb looked at me more closely, and I saw recognition in his eyes. He had seen me a few times back when Ethan and Sarah still welcomed him into their home, before everything went south. "Mrs. Miller," he said, and there was something dangerous in his overly calm voice. "You shouldn't be here. That was very stupid of you." "Let my son go," I said, standing up with difficulty. My whole body hurt, but I stood tall. "Let him go now and leave. You still have time to run before I call the police." Caleb laughed. It was a cold sound, devoid of humor. "You aren't calling any police. You know why? Because if you scream, if you try to call anyone, I'm going to kill Ethan. I'm going to shoot him in the head right in front of you. And then I'm going to kill Sarah, and then I'm going to kill you." He pointed the gun at me. My heart was beating wildly, but I didn't back down. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, trying to buy time, trying to think of a way out. "Ethan is married to your sister. He's family." "Family?" Caleb spat the word as if it were poison. "Ethan never treated me like family. He always looked down on me, like he was better than me. With his nice house, his good job, his perfect little life, while I was out on the street, struggling, with nothing, with nobody. You chose that path, I replied. Ethan tried to help you several times. He offered to get you a job, to help you get into a rehab clinic. But you refused. You preferred the drugs. Shut your mouth, he screamed, the hand with the gun shaking. You don't know anything. You don't know what it's like. Sarah appeared in the doorway, her eyes wide when she saw me. Mrs. Miller, she whispered, and I saw tears streaming down her face. I'm so sorry. I tried to protect Ethan, but I couldn't. Caleb said he was going to kill him, going to kill me, going to kill all of us if I didn't help. I know, honey, I replied gently, even with the gun pointed at me. It's not your fault. Yes, it is, Caleb shouted. It is her fault. If she had kept her mouth shut, if she had helped me from the beginning, none of this would have happened. But no, she had to be crying, begging for me to let Ethan go, as if I was just going to release the idiot after he saw me with the merchandise. What merchandise? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Drugs, old woman. Cocaine, crack, crystal, kilos of it. My partners and I have been using your son's house as a distribution point for 3 weeks. It was perfect until that son of a bee showed up at the house at noon yesterday, when he should have been at work. Ethan had mentioned he was taking a few days off before Christmas. Caleb clearly didn't know that and was caught by surprise. He saw us unloading the product, Caleb continued, his voice full of rage. Tried to play the hero. Said he was going to call the cops. We had to teach him a lesson. Vince here broke his leg with a baseball bat. It was very entertaining to hear him scream. I felt bile rise in my throat. The image of my son being beaten, having his leg broken, made me feel a rage so intense that for a moment I forgot the fear. You are monsters, I whispered. We are survivors, Caleb corrected. And you, old lady, just became a problem. Vince, lock her in the shed with Ethan. I'm going to decide what to do with both of them after we finish packing up the product. Vince came toward me. I thought about fighting again, but I saw it was useless. There were 3 men, all stronger than me, and one of them was armed. If I fought now, I would be killed instantly, and then there would be no one to help Ethan. I let Vince grab me by the arms and drag me to the shed. He ripped off the rest of the hinges I had loosened and opened the door. The smell that came out of there made me cough. Blood, urine, sweat, fear, all mixed into a nauseating stench. Vince threw me inside and slammed the door behind him, leaving me in almost total darkness. Mom! Ethan's voice came from the darkest corner of the shed. My eyes slowly adjusted to the little light coming through the cracks in the door. And then I saw my son. He was sitting on the cold concrete floor, back leaning against the wall. A thick chain secured his right ankle to a metal hook bolted into the floor. His leg was swollen, purple, visibly broken. There was dried blood on his face. His shirt was torn and covered in dark stains. One of his eyes was so swollen he could barely open it. But when he saw me, he tried to smile. Hi, Mom. I ran to him as fast as my old legs allowed and threw myself by his side, hugging him carefully so as not to hurt him more. He rested his head on my shoulder and started to cry. Not the desperate cry of before, but a cry of relief, of not being alone anymore. My boy, I murmured, stroking his dirty, matted hair. My son, what did they do to you? It doesn't matter, he said, his voice cracking. You came. I can't believe you came. When I read that message Caleb sent from my phone, I thought you were never going to want to speak to me again. I knew it wasn't you, I replied, wiping his tears with my trembling hands. A mother always knows. Always. I looked around the small shed. There was an old table in the corner with scattered tools, a saw, a hammer, pliers. My eyes stopped on the saw. Ethan, can we cut that chain? He shook his head. I already tried. It's hardened steel. We'd need an electric saw or bolt cutters. The tools in here won't work. I picked up the hammer anyway and examined the metal hook in the floor. It was bolted into the concrete, but the concrete around it looked old, with cracks. Maybe if I hit it enough. Mom, we don't have time, Ethan said. They're going to come back, and when they do, He didn't need to finish the sentence. We both knew what Caleb planned to do. He couldn't leave living witnesses, not after everything that had happened. Then we need a plan, I said, forcing my mind to work through the fear and shock. We need to find a way to get out of here alive. How? Ethan asked, and there was desperation in his voice. There are 3 men, one of them armed. You are. Sorry, Mom. But you are 70 years old, and I can barely stand up with this leg. He was right. In a direct fight, we had no chance. But maybe we didn't need to fight head on. Maybe there was another way. Your phone? I said suddenly. Where is your phone? Caleb took it. He has it in the kitchen. Why? I thought fast. If I could get Ethan's phone, I could call the police. But for that, I would need to get out of the shed, enter the house without being seen, find the phone, and make the call before someone caught me. It was almost impossible, but it was the only chance we had. Mom, what are you thinking? Ethan knew me well enough to recognize that look on my face. I'm going to get out of here and get help, I replied, already standing up. No, Mom. They'll kill you. They're going to kill us anyway, if we stay here waiting, I argued. At least this way we have a chance. I went to the door and peeked through the crack. The yard was empty. Caleb and the others must have gone back inside the house. It was now or never. I love you, son, I whispered. No matter what happens, remember that. Mom, no. But I was already opening the door slowly, just enough to squeeze through. The cold night air hit me like a slap. I closed the door behind me silently and crouched in the shadows, analyzing the situation. The house had some lights on now. Through the kitchen window, I could see Caleb and Vince sitting at the table, counting money. The third man wasn't in sight, probably in the living room guarding Sarah or organizing the drugs. I needed to get in without being seen. But how? I remembered that Ethan had installed a cat door in the laundry room's back door, even though they didn't have a cat. Sarah wanted to adopt one, but they never got around to it. Was the little door still there? I moved slowly along the side of the house, staying in the shadows until I reached the laundry room door. And yes, there was the little door, small, but maybe big enough for me to pass through. I had to try. I knelt on the cold ground and pushed the cat door slowly. It opened with a slight squeak that made me freeze, heart pounding. I waited, listening. No alarm sound, no one coming to investigate. I pushed my body through the narrow opening. It was difficult, my old bones protesting, my muscles screaming with the effort. I got stuck halfway for a terrible moment, but managed to wiggle and get through. I was inside. The laundry room was dark and silent. I moved like a ghost to the door that led to the hallway. Through it, I could hear voices coming from the kitchen. Finish this soon, Caleb was saying. It's already too risky if someone notices Ethan didn't show up for work after the holidays. We're going to make it look like an accident, Vince's voice replied. House fire, his body, and the old ladies burned too badly for clear identification. We'll say they were cooking something, and it all went to hell. And Sarah? She disappears, vanishes. People will think she ran away after the trauma of losing her husband and mother-in-law. No body, no crime. My blood ran cold. They had it all planned. And Sarah? Poor Sarah. She would be forced to disappear, live in fear forever, knowing what happened. Unless I stopped it. Ethan's cell phone was on the kitchen table. I could see it from there, but there were 2 men between it and me. I needed a distraction. My eyes swept the laundry room, a washing machine, dryer, cleaning products, a broom, a bucket, and a gallon of bleach. A terrible and brilliant idea sprang into my mind. I grabbed the gallon of bleach and a bottle of multi-purpose cleaner with ammonia that was under the sink. I knew from my own experience that mixing certain cleaning products could create toxic fumes. It was dangerous, irresponsible, and exactly what I needed. Silently, I poured a generous amount of bleach into the bucket. Then I added the cleaner. The mixture started to foam immediately, and a strong, suffocating vapor began to rise. I lifted the bucket, took a deep breath, and threw it through the open hallway door toward the kitchen. The bucket flew, spilling its contents across the floor and spreading that toxic vapor. Caleb and Vince jumped from their chairs, shouting, "What the hell is this? Is something burning?" The chemical smoke quickly invaded the hallway and started entering the kitchen. The men were coughing, eyes watering. In the confusion, I ran out of the laundry room, holding my breath as long as I could, and grabbed the phone that was on the table. "It's the old lady!" Vince yelled when he saw me. "She's here!" But I was already running back, fleeing from them, with the phone clutched against my chest. Heavy footsteps followed me. Caleb was screaming obscenities. I reached the living room and saw the third man getting up from the sofa, confused. Sarah was in the corner, eyes wide. There was no time for explanations. I ran to the front door and threw it open, bolting out of the house. The cold night air burned my lungs as I ran down the quiet residential street. Behind me, I heard the door open violently and the men coming out. "Get her, damn it! Don't let her escape!" My old body wasn't used to this. Every step was agony, my heart beating so hard I thought it would explode. But I kept running, fingers already trying to unlock Ethan's phone as I ran. Thank God it didn't have a passcode. He always left it unlocked when he was home. I dialed 911 while I ran, almost tripping over a crack in the sidewalk. "Emergency 911, a female voice answered. "Help!" I screamed, gasping. "They are chasing me. Acacia Avenue, number 245. My son is kidnapped. There are drugs in the house, armed men." A gunshot rang out behind me. I heard the asphalt get hit a few feet away. I screamed and threw myself behind a parked car. "They shot at me! They are shooting!" I yelled into the phone. "Ma'am, stay calm. Units are on the way. Where are you exactly?" But I couldn't answer. Caleb and Vince were running in my direction. I got up and kept running, turning down a side street, then another. The neighborhood was a maze of residential streets I didn't know. Another shot. This time it hit a streetlight above me, shattering the glass and showering me with fragments. I turned another corner and saw a small church. The door was locked, but there was a side gate that led to a garden. I ran over there and threw myself behind a stone statue of the Virgin Mary, gasping, every muscle in my body screaming. I pressed the phone against my chest, trying to control my breathing, trying not to make a sound. Heavy footsteps approached. I heard Caleb and Vince's voices arguing. "Did you see where she went? She has to be around here somewhere. The old lady couldn't have gone far. We have to find her before the cops get here. If she talked to them, they must be on their way. Then let's find that bee fast and end this." I stayed completely still, hidden behind the statue, praying silently that they wouldn't find me. My whole body was shaking, not from cold, but from pure terror. I had a phone. I had called the police, but I didn't know how long they would take to arrive. And if they didn't arrive in time? The footsteps got closer. Caleb and Vince were searching the church garden. I saw the shadow of one of them pass along the wall near where I was hiding. "Look here," Vince said, and my heart almost stopped. "Footprints in the wet grass? They lead over that way?" They were tracking me. In a matter of seconds, they would find me. I looked around desperately, looking for a way out. A weapon, anything. My eyes landed on a piece of wood on the ground, part of a broken bench. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. I grabbed the wood and waited. If they were going to find me anyway, at least I wasn't going to make it easy for them. The shadow on the wall grew larger. Someone was coming. I held the wood with both hands, ready to swing it with all the strength I had left. And then I heard the most beautiful sound in the world. Sirens, distant but unmistakable. The police were coming. Caleb cursed. "Let's go, now." "What about the old lady?" "Screw the old lady. If we stay here, we're gonna get busted. Let's go. Move." The footsteps ran away. I heard the sound of an engine starting, tires screeching on the asphalt. They were fleeing. I waited a few more minutes, just to be sure, before coming out from behind the statue. My legs barely held me up. I stumbled to the church garden gate and leaned on it, shaking uncontrollably. The sirens were closer now. Blue and red lights began to flash in the street. 2, 3, 4 patrol cars arrived, braking sharply. Police officers got out with guns drawn. "Over here!" I screamed, with all the strength I had left, waving. "I called! It's me!" An officer approached cautiously, guns still pointed at me until he was sure I wasn't a threat. "Ma'am, did you call emergency?" Yes, I breathed with difficulty. "My son, he is kidnapped on Acacia Avenue, number 1245. They hurt him. They broke his leg. There are armed men there. Drugs. There is a woman too, Sarah. She is my daughter-in-law. They forced her. The words came out in an incoherent stream. The policeman held me gently by the shoulders. Calm down, ma'am. Breathe. We already sent units to the address. Are you hurt? I looked at myself as if seeing myself for the first time. My clothes were torn and dirty. I had scratches on my arms and legs. My head throbbed where I had hit it when Vince tackled me. But none of that mattered. My son, I said. I need to get to my son. The policeman led me to one of the patrol cars and had me sit in the back seat. Another officer brought me a bottle of water and a blanket. I drank avidly, realizing how dehydrated I was. My whole body ached, but my mind was focused on only one thing. Ethan. We're going to take you to the hospital to get checked out, the policeman said. No, I replied firmly. First, I want to see my son. I need to know he's okay. The policeman hesitated, but something in my expression must have convinced him that arguing was useless. He spoke something into the radio and then said, Okay, I'll take you there, but you need to promise you'll let the paramedics examine you afterward. I agreed, and he drove to Ethan's house. When we arrived, there were at least 6 patrol cars blocking the street. Armed police had surrounded the house, but it seemed there was no one left inside. The suspects fled before we arrived, the officer informed me. But we found evidence of drug trafficking inside the house, a lot of material. And we found a woman, Sarah Miller. She is being attended to now. They said there is a man locked in the shed out back. My son! I got up so fast I almost fell. Let me see him, please. The policeman helped me out of the patrol car and guided me to the backyard. There were paramedics running back and forth, more police photographing the scene, collecting evidence. And there, coming out of the shed on a stretcher, was Ethan. Ethan! I shouted, running toward him as fast as my old legs allowed. He turned his head and saw me. His swollen face lit up. Mom! The paramedics stopped the stretcher so I could get close. I took Ethan's hand, squeezing it tight. He was alive, hurt, suffering, but alive. Is this lady your mother? Asked one of the paramedics. We're going to take him to the hospital now. His leg is badly fractured and he is in shock, but he's going to be okay. I looked at my son and saw tears streaming down his face. You saved my life, he whispered. You are amazing, Mom. You are my son. I replied simply. I will always protect you, always. They took him to the ambulance. I went with him, holding his hand the entire way to the hospital. Sarah was there too, on another stretcher, in shock but physically unharmed. The paramedics examined me briefly and said I also needed to be treated, but I insisted on staying close to Ethan. At the hospital, they took Ethan straight to surgery. His leg was broken so badly he would need pins and metal plates. I sat in the waiting room, still wrapped in the blanket the police gave me. And it was only then that it all hit me at once. I started to cry, not a delicate cry, but deep sobs that shook my whole body. I cried for the pain, for the fear, for the terror of almost having lost my son. I cried with relief because he was alive. I cried because for a moment back there in the yard when that man was strangling me, I thought I would never see Ethan again. Sarah came to sit beside me. She was crying too, eyes swollen and red. Mrs. Miller, she said, her voice broken. I am so sorry. I should have been stronger. I should have protected him better. But I was so scared. I know, honey, I replied, pulling her into a hug. You were a victim in all this too. Don't blame yourself. But I cooperated. I let Caleb use our house. I let him hurt Ethan. What kind of wife does that? A wife who was being threatened with death, I said firmly. You did what you needed to do to survive, and you didn't let Ethan die. You kept him alive until I got there. She sobbed into my shoulder. 2 broken women, hugging, waiting for news of the man we both loved. Hours later, a doctor finally came out of the surgery room. I stood up so fast I got dizzy. How is he? The surgery was successful, the doctor said with a small smile. We placed pins and plates in the leg. He's going to need intensive physical therapy and will probably have a slight limp for the rest of his life, but he will be able to walk normally. Considering the severity of the fracture, he got lucky. Lucky. I wouldn't call it lucky. I would call it a miracle. Can I see him? He is still in recovery, but we will be taking him to a room shortly. You can see him there." I waited another hour, which felt like an eternity, before finally being taken to Ethan's room. He was awake, despite the strong painkillers, and smiled when he saw me enter. "Hi, Mom." "Hi, my love," I replied, sitting in the chair next to the bed and taking his hand. "How do you feel?" "Like I got run over by a truck," he said with a weak laugh. "But alive, thanks to you." "You scared me to death," I admitted. "When I read that message, I knew you would come," he interrupted. "Even when Caleb said he was sure you wouldn't come, that you were going to believe the message, I knew you are too smart to fall for that, and that you love me too much to abandon me." I squeezed his hand, unable to speak because of the lump in my throat. "Mom, you faced armed men. You broke into a house full of drug dealers. You fought a guy 3 times your size. You are the bravest person I know." "It wasn't bravery," I replied. "It was love, and love makes you capable of anything." A police officer entered the room at that moment, asking for permission. He was a detective, an older man with gray hair and tired eyes. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, "but I need to ask a few questions, if you ladies and the gentlemen are up to it." We spent the next hour recounting everything, from the moment I received the message to the escape through the neighborhood. The detective took careful notes, occasionally asking questions to clarify details. "Did you catch the men?" I asked when we finished. The detective shook his head. "Not yet, but we have their names, descriptions, and a nationwide manhunt has been initiated. They won't run for long, especially with all the evidence we found in the house. There were enough drugs there to put them all in prison for decades." Ethan stayed in the hospital for 5 days. I stayed with him the whole time, sleeping in an uncomfortable chair next to his bed, refusing to leave even when the nurses insisted I should rest at home. Sarah came every day too. At first, she and Ethan barely spoke. There was tension between them, a silent pain. But slowly, as the days went by, they started to really talk about what had happened, about the fear, about Caleb's betrayal. "He's my brother," Sarah said at a particularly difficult moment. "I grew up with him, and even knowing about all his problems, I never thought he would be capable of something like this, of hurting you, of threatening us with death." "He isn't your brother anymore," Ethan replied, but his voice was gentle, without anger. "The Caleb you knew died a long time ago. Drugs killed that person and left only a violent stranger." It was on the 3rd day that we received news from the police. They had caught Caleb and Vince. The 3rd man was still at large, but it was a matter of time. Caleb was caught attempting to cross the southern border. He had money and drugs in the car. "He's going to be tried," the detective informed us. "With all the evidence we have, plus your testimonies, he's looking at least 20 years, probably more." Sarah broke down in tears when she found out. Tears of relief, but also of loss. As much as Caleb had become a monster, he was still her brother, and now he would lose decades of his life behind bars. When they finally discharged Ethan, we went back to his house. The police had released the crime scene, but everything was turned upside down, messed up by the investigation. Sarah and I spent days cleaning, organizing, trying to make the house look like a home again instead of a scene of horror. The shed out back was completely cleaned out. I insisted on doing that myself, even though Ethan protested. I needed to erase any trace of what had happened there. I scrubbed the floor where my son had bled. I removed the chain and the metal hook. I painted the walls a bright, cheerful color. When I finished, it wasn't a prison anymore. It was just a regular shed again. Ethan went to physical therapy 3 times a week. It was painful, exhausting, but he persisted. I went with him whenever I could, holding his hand when the pain became unbearable, cheering him on when he wanted to give up. "You're going to walk again," I always said. "You're going to run, dance, live. This is temporary. The pain is temporary, but you are strong. You are my son, and we don't give up." It took 3 months, but he finally managed to walk without crutches, with a slight limp, as the doctor predicted. But he was walking, and every step was a victory. It was on a Sunday in March, 4 months after that terrible night, that we had the court hearing. Ethan, Sarah, and I sat on the victim's bench while Caleb and Vince were brought in handcuffed. Caleb was unrecognizable, too thin, with deep, dark circles, eyes empty. When his gaze met mine, I didn't see remorse. I only saw rage, rage for having been caught, rage for having lost. The trial was quick, with all the evidence against them. The drugs found in the house, the testimonies, the recordings from neighborhood security cameras showing the suspects fleeing. There was no possible defense. Caleb was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Vince received 30 years for attempted murder against me and drug trafficking. The third man, when captured, would face similar charges. When the judge banged the gavel, announcing the sentences, I felt an immense weight being lifted from my shoulders. Justice had been served. My son was safe. All of us were safe. Sarah cried through the entire sentencing. Afterward, in the hallway of the courthouse, she approached her parents, who had come to support her, horrified by what their son had done. "Do you want to see him?" asked her mother. "Before they take him away?" Sarah looked at Ethan. He nodded. "Go. Say what you need to say. I'll be here when you get back." Sarah went, escorted by guards, to the room where Caleb was waiting to be transported back to prison. I don't know what she said to him. She never told us. But when she came back, her eyes were red, but also at peace, as if she had closed a chapter. That night, the three of us, Ethan, Sarah, and I, sat at the dining table in their house. I had made Ethan's favorite stew, the same one I used to make when he was a child and was sick or sad. "Thanks, Mom," Ethan said, his hand finding mine across the table. "For everything. For not believing that message. For coming to get me. For risking your life to save me." "You are my son," I replied, as I had said so many times. "I will always protect you, no matter what, no matter when, no matter from whom." Sarah wiped a tear from her face. "Mrs. Miller, I want to say thank you too. You saved Ethan, but you also saved me. If you hadn't shown up, if you hadn't called the police, I don't know what would have happened to us. We're family," I said simply. "And family protects each other." We ate in comfortable silence, but it was a different silence from the heavy, terrifying silence of that terrible night. It was a silence of peace, safety, and love. Months passed. Spring gave way to summer, and then to autumn. Ethan went back to work, although on a reduced schedule at first. His limp lessened with continuous physical therapy until it was barely noticeable. Sarah changed jobs. The old one reminded her too much of her brother, of the whole tragedy. At the new job, she blossomed. She made new friends. She started therapy to deal with the trauma. Slowly, the cheerful woman she used to be started to come back. I went back to my little house, but I visited Ethan and Sarah every week. Sometimes I stayed the whole weekend. We cooked together, watched movies, simply lived. We appreciated every peaceful moment after having been so close to losing them. It was in December, almost a year after that horrible night, that Ethan called me. "Mom, this year Christmas is going to be different," he said. "This year, we're going to do it right. You're coming here on Christmas Eve and staying with us until after New Year's. No excuses. But don't you two want privacy? Mom, you are part of our family. You always were. And this year, we have a lot to celebrate. We have being alive, being together, being safe." So, on Christmas Eve, I went to their house. This time I didn't just bring simple gifts. I brought my heart full of gratitude. The house was beautifully decorated. Christmas lights twinkled in the windows. A huge tree occupied the corner of the living room, covered in ornaments and memories. Music was playing, not violent rap, but soft and joyful carols. We ate turkey breast that Ethan and Sarah cooked together. We laughed, told stories, toasted with cheap but delicious wine. And when midnight came, we hugged. "Merry Christmas, Mom," Ethan said, hugging me tight. "I love you so much." "I love you too, my son. I will always love you." I looked around the room. The lit tree, the gifts underneath it, the smiling faces of the people I loved, and felt my heart overflow. A year ago, around this same time, I had received a message that changed everything. A cruel, false message, but one that ended up leading me to save my son. And now, a year later, we were here. Scars, yes, trauma, for sure, but alive, together, a family. People say a mother's instinct is the most powerful force in the world. And after everything I went through, I believe that completely. Because a mother's love knows no limits, knows no fear. When your child needs you, you find strength you didn't even know you had. You face armed men, break into houses, fight against the impossible, and you do all that without thinking twice, because there is no choice. Protecting your child isn't a conscious decision. It is an instinct as basic as breathing. That Christmas night, as we sat together in the living room, I looked at Ethan, my son, my miracle, and thought of all the mothers out there, mothers facing their own demons to protect their children, mothers fighting silent battles that no one sees, mothers who never give up, no matter how hard it gets. And I thought, if you ever feel that instinct saying something is wrong with your child, believe it. Don't ignore it. Don't let fear or doubt paralyze you. Because a mother always knows, and sometimes that instinct is the only thing standing between your child and disaster. Ethan squeezed my hand, bringing me back to the present moment. What are you thinking about, Mom? About how lucky I am, I replied honestly. To have you, to have survived, to be here, in this moment. He smiled. That smile I had known since he was a baby. Luck has nothing to do with it. You saved me. You are a hero, Mom. I'm not a hero, I corrected. I'm just a mother doing what any mother would do, protecting her child. And it was true. I didn't do anything extraordinary. I just did what my heart commanded, what my love for Ethan demanded, and I would do it all again, without hesitation, if necessary. Because that's the thing about being a mother. You never really stop being a mother, no matter how old your child is, no matter how independent they are. When they need you, you are there, always. And that cruel message I received a year ago, old lady, don't even think about coming here. I don't need you, ended up proving exactly the opposite. My son needed me more than ever, and I showed up. I fought. I won. Because that is what mothers do. We show up. Always.